AWS has its own offering for Kubernetes. Setting up Kubernetes from scratch isn't always the easiest thing to do though, so AWS has made it very easy to make Kubernetes available to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through how we would use AWS to create Kubernetes clusters using the AWS console. We'll also walk through how we create node groups using AWS. To start off, when we deploy an application with Kubernetes, there are two basic components that we would want to configure. The first one is something called a deployment YAML file, and the second one is called a service YAML file. The deployment YAML file specifies how we deploy an application. In practice, we would be using this to set up what Docker container to use and configurations of the pods that would be created off of it. The service YAML file specifies how we will set up the service that exposes our application to our consumers. So let's start off by taking a quick look at what these files might look like. Starting off with the deployment YAML file, we see that we can specify that this is a deployment YAML file, and there are some configurations such as what I want to name my app, number of replicas that I want, and some other pieces of metadata. One important thing to look at is how we set up the containers. As you can see here, this configuration block here with containers is what specifies what Docker image to be using. Here, I've specified that I want to use the image here that is linking to the Docker images that I have in my own Docker Hub, meaning this deployment file will be used to create the Docker images for the simple node application. Now, the service YAML file is the file that specifies how we want our pods to be abstracted. Remember, in our deployment YAML file, it said deployment, whereas in our service YAML file, we can see here that it says it's a service. We have some metadata such as telling Kubernetes that we want to expose these pods through a service on port 80 using the TCP protocol. And to do that, we tie it in with the pods named my app. Now, my service here is pretty bare bones and is pretty short. If we want to become more sophisticated, there are a lot more configurations that we can do to this service file to make it more feature heavy. For the purposes of this exercise though, I want to keep the files as simple as possible so you can see the core components of what we might need to get an application up and running.